Trying to solve with our value offer, with our training, with our consulting. And probably this has to do with my experience seeing what happens when we do training in organizations, and we come back later to see how that training impacted the organization. So we've identified, and maybe I shouldn't say we, I think it has been identified that most negotiators, and I know this is like a harsh claim to begin the workshop with, reach suboptimal deals. According to Kellogg, some research they did, 80% of negotiators reach suboptimal deals. So what does that mean? It means that either they leave value on the table, which means they reach a deal and they could have reached a better deal that would have been better for both parties, which somehow doesn't make sense. You know, why reach a deal that is less optimal than a better deal? We're going to explore this because this is one of the most important aspects in negotiation. But this is extremely common. Negotiators tend to leave value on the table. The other way to reach suboptimal deals, and I think sometimes we can relate to this better, is we settle for too little. We have this sense that, okay, I ended up with a very small slice of the pie, and there was really no reason for that. Why did I end up with such a suboptimal deal compared to the deal my counterpart got? I ended up with too little compared to what I could have gotten. This is different from the previous one, because the previous one is what we call win-win negotiations. Win-win negotiations is I could have improved the deal for me, and I could have improved the deal for you without making the deal for me worse. This is win-lose negotiations. They got a lot more value than I got, and it doesn't really make sense that they did. And as they made the deal better for them, they made the deal worse for me. Does that make sense? Okay. We'll revisit this in much more detail, but I want you to give you that flavor of why we reach suboptimal deals before we begin. The fourth reason is we settle for something less than our BADNA. If you've ever taken a negotiation course or read a book, you've heard the concept BADNA. BADNA comes from a book called, I'm sure a lot of you have read it, Getting to Yes, which is still a very important book. It's perhaps the first relevant book about negotiation. The author is Roger Fisher, a professor at Harvard, and he was sort of the pioneer in this field. And BADNA means best alternative to a negotiated agreement, which means what is my plan B? If I don't reach a deal with you, what is the best plan B I have? That's what BADNA means. And sometimes, for reasons that I'll explain in a moment, people accept something which is worse than their BADNA. So that doesn't make sense. Why would I reach a deal with you if I can do something better with somebody else? So that means also in negotiation, you don't always have to reach a deal. Sometimes the best deal in negotiation is no deal. You need to walk away. We talked a little bit about that last night at dinner, or you talked a little bit about that. Sometimes you want to walk away because your BADNA is better. So that doesn't make sense. Why does this happen? Because a lot of times people don't think about their BADNA. They don't think about what can I do if I don't reach a deal. And we're going to look at this more carefully and see that this is critical. You should always be thinking about what is my BADNA and how can I improve my BADNA. And the opposite mistake is you walk away from deals that are better than your BADNA. That happens a lot also. Sometimes it's for emotional reasons, pride. I'm not going to negotiate with Pete, I don't like him. So I know it's better to reach a deal with him, but I'm walking away. So a lot of times we walk away because we get emotional, or also because we did not assess our BADNA correctly. So assessing the BADNA, the best alternative to negotiated agreement, is a critical part of negotiation. But we'll look at that. Pete, yes?
So thinking about the BADNA and people settling for worse than BADNA, and what role do you think corporate sort of HR policies where BD people are told you have to sign 2 deals this year to get your bonus. Is there an interplay with that, do you think? And is there a recommendation that could be explored where people are pushed away from metrics of signing deals as a recommendation?
Yeah, I think you covered the answer a little bit. A lot of times it has to do with misalignment of interest between the negotiator and the corporation. I mean, if your bonus is at stake, if you don't close the deal, even if the deal is not so good, but your motivation is, and we talked about that last night, you always should be looking about, Tim mentioned, if you're negotiating, you should always begin by what are my motivations, what are their motivations? And motivations drive decisions, right? There's different things that create motivations, but if I want to lose my commission, I might as well sign a mediocre deal so I don't lose my commission. That's one. The other one is, and I'm going to talk about it in a moment, is metrics. What metrics is the organization using to tell its negotiators what's a good deal? And we're going to see that wrong metrics, biases, create biases that makes their negotiators negotiate poorly. So metrics becomes very critical. And the trick is in negotiation is setting those metrics is not so easy. We're going to see why in a moment, but it's critical. We're going to see that there's 3 types of metrics in negotiation, what we call substantive metrics, like payment terms, price, length of contract. Those could be substantive metrics. But there should also be relational metrics, and we talked about that last night too. What is the quality of the relationship I want to have with this person when after the deal? Because, by the way, and you were right, most of the time we negotiate with people with whom we're going to negotiate again and again, or who can affect our reputation. So, relational metrics become very critical. And then the last set of metrics, which is very substantive to negotiating effectively, is process metrics, which is metrics that measure if you're following the process of negotiation correctly. Because we know that if you don't follow the process, the outcome is probably not going to be good. And I'll address that also in a moment. Any questions up to here? Yes, please.
Maybe you'll get to this later on. Obviously, some deals are suboptimal, but I'm kind of curious as to who conducted this analysis of the deals being suboptimal. How did they evaluate it?
Yeah, the reason every major university has done that. I'm partial to Kellogg, as you can see. So I know they did this. They get executives from all over the world. So they use the simulations in the classroom to measure those outcomes. And let me get ahead of myself. There is a huge problem in negotiation, and sometimes that's why people don't pay so much attention about how can I negotiate more effectively, or how can my organization become more effective at negotiation. The problem in negotiation is that the value available to negotiate in a deal is hidden. You don't see it. So there's no way in real life that you can sit down and say, okay, did we leave value on the table? Unless there is full disclosure, which is almost impossible, and I'll address that too, you don't know. But when we're teaching, we're using simulations in which we know the full potential of value. So I think that's how they measure it. I'm sure they also did other type of measures, but I know they did a lot of research based on that. Does that answer your question? Okay. This is the other very interesting observation. This is from my experience, but also from research, since you like research, from a guy called Danny Ertel at Harvard. I rarely, and I'm going to say rarely, but I could also almost say never, I rarely have found an organization that has in place a negotiation system. Do you know an organization that has a rigorous, systematic negotiation system? Not easy, right? maybe some guidelines, but
What do you mean by system?
like, do you have a marketing system in your organization? Do you have a financial system in your organization? Yeah, it's very strict, right?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
guideline.
yeah, but they're fairly strict, right? That you have to do it in a certain way. You cannot say, okay, this morning I'm going to look and negotiate the finances this way. There is a strict system, okay. And that fascinates me, because how important is negotiation to any organization? Very important, not so important. I think it's terribly important. You negotiate everything. You negotiate with customers, you negotiate with suppliers, you negotiate with the government, you negotiate M&As, you negotiate IP, you negotiate with colleagues, you negotiate with employees, you're negotiating all the time. And yet organizations don't have a system. So why is that? And what is the consequences of that? Well, the first one is that what we see, and this is how we started our business, at best what they do is they send people to trainings, Harvard, Kellogg, MIT, or negotiation by design, and they hope that if they train those individuals will come back to the organization and do a great job. So, well, probably, if not, I wouldn't have a job, but still, the approach they're going to use is ad hoc. Each individual is going to take what they learned and they're going to apply it in their best, with their best criteria. But that doesn't necessarily mean there's a homogeneous approach to negotiation throughout the organization. And what we believe is that creates inconsistency and reduces effectiveness, which brings me to the next slide. If you have really good negotiators, star negotiators, hero negotiators, where is your negotiation knowledge? All the experience you've developed in each one of your organizations, where is that knowledge? It's in your head, it's tacit. And when those people leave, what happens? I mean, maybe they were really good mentors and they taught other people how to do things, but that's still ad hoc, and that's still the motivation of a person that say, I'm going to be a good mentor. But that knowledge usually lives with them. Is not accumulated in the organization, which again surprises me, because if negotiation is so important, why do organizations not think about how can I keep this knowledge? How can I build learning curves in negotiation? And the fourth problem, which of course relates to the previous, is we see organizations use inappropriate metrics. They use very transactional metrics, very short-term metrics, very financial metrics, all things that are, by the way, easier to measure, but they don't think about things like, okay, what are the long-term metrics that I'm aiming at? How does the metrics for this negotiation align with the objective, the strategic objectives of the organization, to the type of relationships I want to develop with my key partners? Every organization has a whole group of key partners. What are the type of relationships I want to create with those people? And again, as I said, we're going to see that there is substantive metrics, relational metrics, and process metrics that you should put in place if you want your negotiators to negotiate effectively.